back to Expertise Unleashed. I'm Brian.
And I'm Michelle.
And today we're going to be talking about what's now, what's new, and what's next, and really it's in regard to, improving, constantly improving, and so we'll just go ahead and jump right in. So when, Michelle, we were, thinking about putting this together, I'm thinking about what's now, like, how do I improve now? A lot of people go back to school, take online courses, learn to play an instrument, learn a new language to try to, improve on what they're doing. But the one thing about, improving is, being intentional, about improving, every day, every week, every month, every year. And so we just kind of want to, unpack some of those things,
Absolutely.
Today in regard to what's now, what's new and what's next. So I got a couple of thoughts in regard to, the now. A lot of people, are doing well, or you may not be doing well in your career, in your business, and things like that. So I think for me, let me just bring it back to me, now, how am I improving now? So this year, I've read probably more this year in these first 4 months than I have probably in the last 2 years. Not that I wasn't reading material in the last 2 years, but I decided that, for where we want to go next, and the things that we want to do, my now consists of, reading different materials, different books on leadership, on business, on relationships, so I can improve in those areas, and strengthen myself, right now for what we're doing, so I can get ready for things that are coming up down the line. So, that's one way, in my journey of improvement, this year that I decided that I'm going to, learn more material and read more things from people who have already really been where I'm trying to go.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good, and you really need to do that, right? Like, progress, when you're thinking about a now, a new, or a next, there's going to be something that's a part of the process that you're going to have to develop, right? You're going to have to do or make part of your, whether it's reading, like you've suggested, or even other things. I think it even starts first with making the mindset shift to, you know what, I do want to improve. And I've got to start now in order to get to that new and next, right? So I think you're spot on with having to make a decision around, hey, there's something I got to do that I want to improve. And that's the way that you have sustainable progress. You see your life changing in different ways. You get to see yourself develop further. Your opportunities open up, your network opens up, the things that you're able to do opens up, because you've made a decision that, hey, improvement is part of the process that I want to engage in. And so I think you have to do that. You have to do that. And why is it important, just kind of throwing it back to you, but why is it important to do that now?
Well, the thing about it is, you want to be able to develop consistency, in the now, for improvement. Mm-hmm. And so I learned this a long time ago. I think I heard it probably in a meeting or something, but they said consistency over time breeds excellence. And so doing the things over and over and repeatedly the right way, will kind of put you in a genius level. Mm-hmm. So when I made the commitment this year, actually this goes back to last year going into this year, I was like, okay, I feel like I'm pretty good. I feel like I know a lot of things. We've done a lot of things, but when I made the commitment, like I said, on Mondays, so Mondays is a day for me, I get a lot of reading in. I look at a lot of material, and I've become consistent in that this year. And so it has allowed me, and it's not the only day that I read, but Mondays is pretty much strictly dedicated, to my learning, for my now, and the reason that is good because a lot of the things that, people will ask me, on phone calls, I've been able to draw on my experiences, but I've also been able to give them some advice and some techniques and things to use, as a product of my continuous reading and learning, throughout these first 4 short months of this year. We are going into May already. It's going by so fast, but so I know I'm better in my now, so whatever's new and next coming up, I know I'm going to be better and be more equipped, to handle it, those things that come up.
Yeah. You know what? One thing that you had as we were preparing for this, there's a thing called passive improvement.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That passive improvement is, hey, I'm going through the motions. I'm just doing what I normally do, kind of where you're operating in default mode. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so this is an example of passive improvement. So we know that we need to learn something different. So we make the investment to go to a conference. We get plane tickets, we get hotel, we get a rental car. We go to the conference and we learn some really, really, really great things. And then we come back and we implement nothing.
Yeah.
And that's an example of passive improvement to where, I know I need to do better and I want to do better. And I made a decision to, to start this process and do something different. And then I don't do anything. Or you read a book. The book has some really great stuff that applies to you, that can help people, but you don't do anything with it. You take a class or you get a certification, but you don't put it on your resume. You don't tell your VP or whatever on your job, that you've done this, that you have this new certification and you learned this new skill. So, you've improved, but it's just sitting, so that doesn't really do anything for anybody.
Yeah, I know. You know what?
Or yourself, or it doesn't do anything for you.
Right. You know what? There's a thing called, and I had to get out of this too, where you accumulate. There's this accumulation without application, right? And so you're just accumulating knowledge, you're accumulating resources, but you're not really doing anything with it. So you just become what they call
I know what you're thinking.
What am I thinking, guys?
Gospel fat.
Yeah. Knowledge fat, all this stuff. But you're doing absolutely nothing with it. And so the goal is, on this improvement journey is to actually apply the things that you're learning. At least one thing. So if you decide, hey, I am deciding that I'm going to get on board with just improvement. I want to do 1% improvement in yourself daily. It doesn't have to be these big strides. Like I'm going to start this big fitness routine and I'm going to go to the gym and all that kind of stuff. We don't want you to not level up on your big things because the big thing becomes too big, to do all at once. But if you say, hey, I'm going to just do a little continual improvement, and every day you're going to get up and read something, spend an hour, or spend one day out of the month on how do I take myself from this, where I am right now, to where it is that I want to be in a year. And doing that 1% improvement makes big strides. Just like they say, it's that, even drops of water will break a rock after a while because it's consistent. And so you want to be consistent with you. You want to evolve and elevate. And the way to do that is to be intentional about improvement is the thing that you need to do.
Yeah. And so, I think it's also important to, it has to be measured. Mm-hmm. Whatever you're doing has to be measurable so you can see, like you said, you talk about improvement, that 1%. Okay, how do I measure the gain? The 1%, what am I putting in place? So for me, like I mentioned before, I noticed that a lot of the things that I was reading, that I can make application on, I have made application on, I know I'm retaining the information, when I can say, hey, you know what? I saw this, or I understand this, or this is how I applied this, and I can give it to somebody else, and that may be a measurement. But for somebody else, it could be like, okay, I have this goal, right now, and I'm working toward this goal, and this is a measurement on how I'm doing on this goal, X, Y, and Z. So it should be measurable, and then I think lastly, we always have to do some self-reflection. Okay, what am I, this is how I want to improve. This is how I'm improving. This is how this is measured. Now let me reflect. Okay, what went good about this, what went bad about this, and maybe what do I need to change, or what a different direction I may need to go in, if you do,
Right.
but reflection is good, on everything that has happened up until now on your improvement journey.
No, I think that's good. We probably better get into point number 2.
Go
Like
ahead.
how do we jump? What's new, right? Because we talked about now and making strides now, but then it's also what's new. And so what new can you learn? What new can you do to improve? So one of the things that I did last year, or actually maybe it was the year before, I said, you know what? I moved into a new role on the corporate side. And this digital strategies piece, I've worked on websites, worked on emails and text campaigns and things like that. But this was a new level. And so I said, as a part of this new level, to really get grounded in it, you know what? I'm going to go back to school and get a certification. And so in that process, you start learning, like, gosh, there's a lot into this. I'm going to need to learn it. I'm going to have to expand my bandwidth a bit, but because you want to be successful in it, and you want to be able to position yourself humbly, I might add, position yourself for growth. And so sometimes it is, what new can I learn that will help me help the others that I'm working with, right? And so thinking about, look at the evolution of AI. If you do not engage in really trying to learn some things that you can do, how does AI work? How can it help me improve my position? How does it help me improve the position of those that I work with, or coach, or lead, or whatever? You need to know it, because people are saying, the job market is going to switch up. AI is going to take over everything. No, the people who know how to use AI, those are going to be the ones that take over everything. So become one of them. You want to, what new, ask yourself the question, what new do I need to learn? Because there's always something. They always say that the biggest room in the house is the room for improvement. And sometimes it is learning something new. And sometimes you get a little intimidated by it, but you don't have to be, because anything that can be learned, you can learn it.
I definitely agree. And I think another thing too about, what's new is it's always exciting. If you're a glass half empty person, I think it's hard, for you to entertain new things. But if you're a glass half full person, it's easier, because new is exciting. It's a different chapter. It's something different mentally. It's like, okay, dang, how much more can I learn on my improvement journey? How will this affect me? How will it affect my family? How will it affect my future? And I think another thing that is good that's important is that, our brains, I believe, this is just my personal opinion, our brains have such capacity, to take on and learn new things. And I think they say we maybe only use 10% or something like that of our brain capacity, over our lifetime. So we always have capacity to improve. But when you start to create these different neural connections, by connecting the dots, working on something new, or thinking about something new that's out there, whether it be, in services, or some other type of business model, your brain just starts to, I think the way God wired us is that, I remember they used to say, let me dial back. They used to say it take 90 days to create a habit. Well, it doesn't take 90 days. That's been disproven now, scientifically and just by trial and error. So when you create these new neural pathways, for things that are new, you open yourself up, to be able to learn at a faster rate and grow at a faster rate, which means you ultimately improve at a faster rate, learning what is new out there and entertaining things that are new. So I think that's important for our viewers to understand that, always doing something new and learning something new is very important in improvement.
Absolutely. So I want to kind of jump in on a couple of things that you said. And here's why doing something new is super powerful. And I want to read these because I think it is helpful. One, it prevents the blind spots. Because sometimes as we get older, there's more of a tendency for us to lean on or revert back to what our experience and our base of knowledge has told us. And so we've got to be careful about just relying on just what we already know or have experienced. It's good to be able to lean on that because you do have that experience, but you also want to continue to improve because you don't want to have those blind spots. The other thing that, and you mentioned the neural pathways, but our world is changing, right? So you want to stay up on what's new and what's current. And one of the things, there's a statistic out there that says research shows that children ask about 300 questions a day, where adults only ask 20. And so sometimes we're not asking questions because there's things that we think we already know. And so but keeping that kind of childlike curiosity going is part of that influence for what's new that helps you stay on the cutting edge. You want to be on the cutting edge without falling off, right? Like you want to be able to help people in whatever way that you do it. You want to always be a part of the leadership of what's going on in that area versus just doing what the defaults tell us to do. And so I think the most successful improvers that I know are the ones that are always looking for, hey, what's new? How do I get involved in that? And you may not get involved in everything, but whatever is applicable for your line of business, for your area of expertise, you want to continue to double down on that. And so that new is key. But we better get into the third one before we run out of time.
Okay, so we've covered what's now, what's new, and the third thing is what's next. What's on the horizon, for you. What vision do you have for yourself? Where do you see yourself, your family, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. I like how the late and great Miles Monroe, he said that his vision casting went out 50 years. And at this particular time, during this particular teaching, he said, and he was specifically speaking to men, he was like, men, for your family, he was like, you should be 50 years in the future. Now 50 years, now I think about 50 years to me, now hopefully God graced me to still be alive, which means I would be 103 years old, but, I do have a vision for our family and where we're wanting to go, but in regard to improvement though, how can you improve if you don't have a vision for anything down the line? Mm-hmm. You're just existing.
Right.
So that is very important. The Bible says, without a vision, the people perish, meaning they cast off restraint. They just do anything. And they're just kind of really just wandering around aimlessly and wild and, don't have a direction that they're pointing in, so, what's next is very important. You're talking about improvement and learning and seeing what's out there, so I think it's very, very critical, that you do develop, a real good strategic vision on where you want to go and what you want your life to look like.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I like that. And I don't know who said this or whatever, but if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. You know, it's important that you determine, you know, for you and in your life and where you want to go, your legacy is that you decide and you design what that vision looks like. Create it. As a matter of fact, it gives you a lot of motivation when you actually put it down on paper. What it says, Habakkuk 2:2 tells us, you know, write the vision and make it plain so that he who reads it can run with it. And so, you know, 50 years into the future, I don't even think about being 103 years old. I look more at like how old will our kids be? How old will their kids be 50 years from now? And what was the inheritance that we left as good men to our children's children, right? And so it's so key and critical. Like when you start to write down, hey, what do we want our life to look like? What should be the next thing that we're working on? I get excited about it. When you start pinning that down and say, hey, this is what we want to be able to do post-retirement, right? You know, like a lot of people work towards, you know, their retirement goals. You know, how much money am I going to need to live the life that I'm living right now or better? You know, what things do I need to put in place to be able to get there? And that's part of that vision casting that you're talking about. Like it's that, you know, you get that internal excitement around what it is. It also helps you stay motivated to actually do it, to apply those things that we've been talking about to actually get you there. And so it's so important to think about what's next and what next can look like for you.
Yeah, because and actually, you know, one of the things that he touched on and that always made an impression on me, and you touched on a little bit too. The vision, your vision, it's not just for you. It is for your kids. It is for your grandkids. You know, I think about, you know, some of the great, you know, business families. You know, the Rockefellers and, you know, the Kennedys in government and, you know, the Vanderbilts and you know and all these people and how they created something, and what they created, their generations are still living on, really without a care in the world. Like they literally don't have to work. You know, they could just live. Now a lot of them do, and you know, and businesses evolved and things like that. You know, but the, you know, vision, you know, what's next, you know, ought to get you really excited. Yeah. You know, it's not anything to run from. And if you don't know, you know, and we talked about this in a previous conversation, but that's when I think you need to do a personal inventory. You know, when you don't know, you know, what's next for you, you know, and what am I good at and all of those things, and getting a mentor and getting a coach and kind of getting some direction, you know, and start reading materials on, you know, on vision and things like that in business, you know, or whatever, however you are looking to improve.
Right. What's next is definitely the activity. So here's what we want to give you. When you think about the vision that you have for your life, what does it look like, and how excited do you get about it? Because you can live every day doing exactly what you do right now. But is that really all that you can do, all that you can be? God says we can have a life that is exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think. But we have to cast that vision so that you know what it is. Write it down and then keep looking at it often so that you stay motivated to get there. So now I love it. You get to talking to me about vision and what does life look like 50 years into the future. Man, I can swim on the tides of energy that it gives me, because what it looks like is so much more beautiful than what it is if we don't do anything to prepare for it.
Yes, it's kind of like these glasses. You know, I had to start wearing glasses, you know, after 50, and I didn't like it. You know, but these glasses allowed me to see things a lot clearer. You know, things became more in focus, you know, when I'm driving, you know, especially when I'm reading, you know, and so this clearer vision that I have now, you know, it allows me to see further, down the line, you know. But what's going to affect that the most is everything I'm doing now. What am I doing now to improve? What's new out there that I can grab onto and take that fits in with my skill set, and what I want to do that can propel me into my next, the vision for me, for my children, for my children's children, for my church, for my business. How can I be an asset, and a benefit at the end of the day? Because that's really, we don't want to just exist. We want to be productive in everything that we do.
No, absolutely. I think that's good, Brad. I think you kind of buttoned it all up. Like, all right, so this is my now. Looking at that, taking that audit. Number 2 is what new do I need to learn? And then 3 is all about, crafting that vision for what's next. All right, so this has been our episode for this week. Don't forget to like, subscribe, give us some comments, and let us know what you guys are thinking about the things that we're sharing. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Brian.
And as always, some people are meant to build a small business, some people are meant to build a large business, and some people are meant to build empires. Which one are you?